Tonight on SIP episode 134, we finally get into it. Closures. Is cork the best? What about synthetic cork? What about glass enclosures? What about screw cap or twist off? Tonight, we're going to break it all down and we're going to tell you which one is actually the best for the wine. And we do it with Bettina Sichel, partner at Laurel Glen. SIP episode 134, Closures, begins now. My name is Martin Cody, co-founder of Cellar Angels, and we are a direct-to-consumer wine company founded in 2010 to essentially evangelize, promote, and help make you more aware of some of the greatest wines coming out of Napa and Sonoma right now. A curator of limited production wines, if you will. And the angel portion of the name is because we have a significant philanthropic bent to where we give a great deal of proceeds to some folks that are less fortunate than all of us. And we're fortunate because we're drinking wine. So there's nothing wrong with that. Tonight, we're going to talk closures. And interestingly enough, when we owned the wine store, we did own a bricks and mortar wine store, which is how we got into this crazy business. It was probably one of the most asked questions. Certainly the top 5 is what's with screw caps? What's better? Why is this wine plastic? How come the champagne cork's bigger? Why is Martin still working here? You know, all those questions were routine questions. Tonight, we're going to get many of them answered, except that last one, I hope. So let's talk about closures. And I do want to bring in tonight's guest, who is one of the most amazing women in wine. Actually, let's just go even a step further. One of the most amazing people in wine, men or women. And it is, I've had the pleasure, privilege, honor of knowing Bettina for probably, this goes back a ways, 20 plus years, I think. For the first time we met, but Bettina Sichel is in the house and she is the proprietor or partner of Laurel Glen. So Bettina, thanks for spending your Friday with us.
Yay. Cheers.
Cheers. And we're going to get to the 100% Sauvignon Blanc in a moment. But when I say you're one of the most revered women in wine, I mean that with all sincerity, because you have had a career that's incredible and still going and getting better and better. And I'm going to ask you to walk me through Bettina's history of kind of, you know, background, nationality. We don't have to go to the Nick Goldschmidt off the record stories or anything like that. But how did you come by a fondness for wine? Let's start there.
Well, I like to say I was weaned on Blue Nun. So I grew up in a wine making family. My father owned the winery in Germany that made Blue Nun, which was a big deal in the 70s and 80s. So wine was always on the table. We spent every summer in Europe, you know, slogging through cellars and vineyards. Not my favorite activity at the time. And I'm the oldest of 3 girls. So it was sort of understood at an early age that I would follow in my father's footsteps and take over the winery. So when I graduated from college, I spent a year in Germany, and then came back and went to work for our importer. And then after a few years of that, I went to work for my father. But Blue Nun was in pretty steady, serious decline by that point. So I worked for my father for 5 or 6 years, helping him sell Blue Nun in the US. And then he was kind of forced to sell the winery. So, you know, by that time, I had spent, I don't know, 7 or 8 years, no, 6, whatever it was, let's say 6 years in the wine business. And I loved it. I mean, it's a great group of people, as you know, Martin. We all love to eat and drink. You know, we have very diverse backgrounds. It's never a dull conversation. And I thought, yeah, I'm good here. So I went to California and started knocking on doors in Napa and Sonoma. And Augustin Huneeus gave me a job, and he was getting ready to launch his kind of pet project, Quintessa.
Okay, hold that thought right there. So I'm going to go back a little bit to Blue Nun. Where was Blue Nun made?
Blue Nun was made in Germany. So my father's family is German. My father's great I don't know. I don't know. The winery was started in 1857. I can't do the math.
Okay, so 1857, the winery was started,
Yes.
and at its height, what was case production, if you remember?
3 million, many cases. There was 3 bottling lines, which went 24/7 at the
And
height of production.
and I don't think in the 50s, and John H. and Barbie, John H., you can definitely attest to this. I don't think in the 60s or 70s, you could open up a refrigerator in the United States and not see a blue bottle inside the door. I kid you not.
Well, okay, Martin, I'm going to set the record straight. I usually don't say anything at this juncture, but I feel I feel this is the right audience to say this. The blue bottle didn't actually come until much, much later. So Blue
Okay.
Nun was not in a blue bottle until, I don't know, the last decade, maybe 2
Ah,
decades. So in the 50s and 60s, it was in a brown bottle, consistent with it being a Rhine wine. And the only thing that was blue was, the label, the habit of the nuns, all that.
right. Did you get any flack from the Catholic Church, or did they just say, hey, knock yourself out? This is holy water?
Well, okay, so here's the story. So Blue Nun is a Liebfraumilch. Liebfraumilch translates to milk of the Virgin Mary. And the reason why it got that name is because, during the Middle Ages, every church had a vineyard and they made wine for sacramental purposes. So there was one church in the town of Worms, which had a vineyard, made, their wine, and some wit, made the joke that this wine is so good, it's like drinking the milk of the Virgin Mary. So needless to say, despite what we've heard about Germans and humor, the name stuck. So
that was Augustus Parker Sr., who later turned. No, I'm just teasing.
So today, Liebfraumilch is a very specific type of wine. It must be made from certain grapes, from certain parts of Germany. It must have a certain sweetness level. So Blue Nun is a Liebfraumilch. So there is a very sort of natural tie-in to nuns.
Interesting. So that wine is still in that style and that category is still being made today.
It is. So my father sold the winery to another German winery, and they continue to make it.
All right. So then you come to the United States, obviously, and you're in California.
I was born in the United States. So my father and his family are Jewish. They fled Germany in the 1930s, came to New York in 1941. My father had this very big career with the CIA, included, helping to fund the French resistance.
If you had Blue Nun and CIA on your bingo card, let me know, because you are a winner.
But after the Second World War, my father's uncle went back to Germany, reclaimed the business, the physical business, which was actually quite badly bombed, rebuilt it. And then when he died in the 1950s, my father inherited this winery in Germany, but by that time he was an American citizen, and he didn't really want to live in Germany again. So he decided he was going to settle in New York, and he hired a manager to run the winery in Germany, and he basically concentrated on sales and marketing in the US.
And what year did you go out to California?
I moved to California in 1992.
All right. And so now we're up to the point to where you're talking about Quintessa. So how did you meet Augustus?
Well, Augustine was actually a friend of my father's. So yes, connections get you in the door. My father basically helped me get the interview, and Augustine was one of the partners of Franciscan Estates, which at the time was Franciscan, Estancia, Mount Veeder, and Franciscan Estates was basically a sales company, and they were just starting to think about adding a marketing department. So I was one of the first people they hired for this new idea, a marketing department. And a year later, Augustine launched, but at the same time, Augustine was getting ready to launch Quintessa. So I was very involved in helping him with that launch. And then I became his first director of sales and marketing, a job that I held for almost 10 years.
Yeah. Wow. And actually basically launched that brand, made it a national treasure, and got placements at some of the most prestigious restaurants and wine stores around the country. And to this day, it's still a hallmark of a fantastic blend, and large, all attributed to you. So I hope the royalties are still flooding in. And
yeah, it was all about profile distribution. That was the whole marketing strategy. Yeah,
good.
no, I mean, like, fortunately, when I go to Quintessa, if people come, people tell me all the time, I'm in Quintessa, can I go? Can you take me? So when I take people to Quintessa, I do get treated very well.
As you should. So that was 92, you were there for about 10 years. And then in 2002, you decided,
Actually,
okay,
the Quintessa gig started with the release of Quintessa, which was 1994. No, I want to
later.
say 96.
Okay.
So I lived in California I moved to California working for my father, whatever, it doesn't matter. But the Quintessa gig started in 1996.
Every time I hear anything anecdotally to your father, I feel like it's going to be followed up with, I shouldn't tell you this. I can't tell you this. It's top secret type of stuff.
Oh, well, I can tell you a good story if we have time.
Plenty of time. This is a
Okay.
subject on closures. We've got time.
So my father wrote his memoirs at the age of 90. And, obviously a large part of the memoirs were about his time in the CIA. So he found a publisher, and the publisher said, we don't feel comfortable publishing this unless we get clearance from the CIA. So they sent the manuscript to Arlington, Virginia, and it came back, and every word except for maybe 3 were redacted. And my father was like, this is ridiculous. I mean, this information is what, I don't know, 40, 50 years old, has been published in other sources. So he made an appointment at the age of 90 to go basically make his case to a committee that they should let him publish this information. So he gets on Amtrak, he goes down to Arlington, to Virginia, wherever it was in Virginia, and he presents his case to this committee as to how this information has been published on the sources. It's no longer national. And then the government shut down.
Oh, geez.
So my joke was, they're just waiting for you to die. But he did not die, and the government reopened, and eventually they sent back the manuscript and flipped it, and only about 3 words were redacted, and he was able to publish everything else.
What is the name of the memoir?
It's called, oh God, I should really know this. It's called, oh God. The tagline is Vintner, Prisoner, Soldier, Spy. Secrets of my life. The secrets of my life, Vintner, Prisoner, Soldier, Spy.
Got it. All right. I'm buying that.
Well, Martin, if you come to the tasting room, I'm happy to give you a copy, because as a dutiful daughter, I bought 300 upon publication and I still have a few.
And you have 285 left.
Not quite, but
no, good.
Really,
all right. That is fantastic. I do want to say, so that's 2006. So now walk me over to how you came across to what back then was called the dark side, the Sonoma side.
Well, so I was at Quintessa for pretty close to 10 years. And then, eventually I left, for a variety of reasons. And I went to the Napa Valley Vintners as their marketing director. So this coincided with the Great Recession. So I get to Napa Valley Vintners, and our membership jumped like 100% in the time I was there, because all these wineries were just panic stricken that they were never going to sell another bottle of expensive Cabernet again. It was a great job, but it was a very demanding job, the kind of place where you felt guilty leaving at 6 p.m. And I had young kids at home, and, it was clear that this was not the right time in my life for this. Right. So one day in like November, sitting at my desk thinking, this isn't really the right place for me, but where do I want to be when I grow up? What do I want to, I need to figure this out. And about that time, this very, very, very wealthy friend of my husband calls, and he is a guy who loves wine. I've known him for years. He's in the habit of calling me 3 or 4 times a year, just to chat about wine. So we had a lovely chat about wine for, 20 minutes. And at the end of the call, he makes this joke. Bettina, you and I should buy a winery someday. Ha ha ha. And, we both laugh. We both hang up the phone. And I will never forget. I was sitting at my desk, and it was one of those moments where it felt like a light bulb went off over my head. And I thought, oh my God, there's never going to be a better time. We should buy a
Mm,
winery. So I call him back. We start talking. He says, I don't want to assume all the risk myself. I'm going to reach out to some friends. I'm going to form an investment group. Bettina, what are we buying? So at that point, I had lived and worked the Napa Valley for, I don't know, 15 years, whatever it was. And I was like, we're buying a Napa Valley winery. So I go out with the intention of buying a Napa Valley winery. And in fact, we tried very hard to buy two very different Napa Valley wineries, and both the deals fell through for very different reasons. And then, and all through this time, my father kept saying to me, you really should talk to my friend Robert Nicholson, whose business it is to buy and sell, winery related assets. I'm like, Dad, I
interesting.
got this. I got lots of connections. I don't need anyone's help. Well, after the second deal fell through, I called Robert Nicholson, and he said, Bettina, I have just the thing for you. And he sent me off to meet Patrick Campbell on Sonoma Mountain. So
Mm,
just to get a sense of the geography. So that meant, well, I lived in the eastern slopes of the Napa Valley, the
oh,
Vaca.
geez.
So that meant going down to the valley floor, traversing the valley floor, going over the Mayacamas, traversing the Sonoma Valley, and then going up Snow Mountain. So, it's a bit of a journey.
Yeah.
But, when I got out of the car, I was blown away. I mean, it is beautiful up there.
Hmm.
And Patrick, it was a beautifully cared for vineyard. So Patrick walked me through the vineyard, even though the man had polio as a kid and walks with crutches. But I like to
Oh,
joke
geez.
that the worst insult you could pay him is holding a door for him. He's very, proud of his autonomy. So
Hmm.
he walks me all through the vineyard on his crutches, and then he takes me into his house. He pours me the 2005 Laurel Glen Cabernet. And it was like sticking your finger in a light bulb in a light socket. I mean, that wine was just like electrifying. It was so different from any Cabernet I'd had. It had so much life, so much, I don't know, energy. And I was just like, wow, this is incredible. And, clearly at Sonoma, the price tag was quite a bit less than what we've
Right.
been looking at in Napa. Um, so that was kind of it. I mean, I could
And
go
that
on.
was 2006, 2007,
That
2010.
was 2000. That was 2010 when I had that, epiphany, and then the deal closed in early 2011.
Oh, fantastic. And yeah, there's some people associated with the project. One of them is I don't even know what you could refer to Phil Kachuri as.
The
I think
viticulturalist.
well, I know that, but I mean, he's also, I think, maybe a founding groupie member of the Grateful Dead. He's been to 250 shows or
That's probably
more.
where he is. I think the last Dead and Company shows tonight, I bet that's where he is.
um, and he's a organic farmer long before organic farming was a thing.
That's right. He helped to put organic farming on the map. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
amazing,
So
amazing individual.
I was introduced to him. So, I'm not a viticulturalist. So I needed somebody to tell me, am I buying, of a sound vineyard? Am I buying a
Right.
vineyard that has lots of problems? So I was introduced to him, and I asked him to help me with the due diligence. So I worked with him long before we actually closed the deal.
Oh, super cool. Yeah, he's a great guy. Just amazing. And his son also, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. It's pretty interesting. All right, I'm going to do our first poll question because it is on tonight's topic of closures. So get your pencils ready. And your first
I'm not
poll,
participating because I would probably fail.
the Franciscan monk Dom Perignon is credited at developing cork for his precious bubbles. True or false? The poll questions are really just designed as breaks so Bettina and I can drink. And this SB is delicious.
Yeah, thanks. It really is tasting well.
All right, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. That is amazing. That is amazing.
Wow, that is really close.
50-50 split. Everybody that said true, congratulations, you are wrong. It is false. I don't know where this rumor started, but Dom Perignon, the monk, came about sometime in the early 1690s. They were manufacturing bubbles or sparkling wine in England 30 years prior to that. And fun fact, England at that point in time was the only one with coal fire furnaces that could actually produce the bottles to withstand the pressure inside the bottle. So it wasn't until 30 or 40 years after that, sometime in the early 1700s, that France actually was able to do something with cork or closures rather. It wasn't Dom Perignon. So next time you hear that rumor, just tell the people wrong, false. I'll actually give you a second one. Since we're going to be talking about Sauvignon Blanc, which of these is the most expensive per ton in Sonoma? Semillon, Chardonnay, Sauvignon Blanc, or Roussanne? And then I think we're going to talk cork closures. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.5, 1, ending. There was a late entrance here. Semillon is actually second most expensive, 2,600 pounds a ton, 95 acres of Semillon planted in Sonoma, 95 acres.
That's it. Wow.
Yeah. By the way, Chardonnay is the least, I'm sorry, Sauvignon Blanc is the least expensive, but Chardonnay has the most planted acres at 15,000 acres as of 2021 under vine. The answer is Roussanne. So Roussanne is $3,500 a ton. Chardonnay is 2,200.
But tell them how many acres. That explains.
Oh yeah, Roussanne has 36 acres planted in all of Sonoma. 36 acres, which is nothing, considering that Chardonnay is 15,000. So when we feature Roussanne producers on Cellar Angels, you know it's a rare feat for someone that's actually going to produce 100% Roussanne just because there's so little of it. All right, Bettina, you decided to make a white wine for the first time ever with this Sauvignon Blanc, and you decided to put a screw cap on it. Why and why? Twist off. I'm sorry. Twist off.
No,
Everyone wants me to.
No, I call it a screw top.
Okay.
Well, a cork isn't really necessary for a wine like this. So cork has the reputation of being the closure for ageable wines, for with good reason. The cork allows a tiny bit of air interchange, and that helps to soften the wine in the bottle. For a wine like this, which is likely to be drunk within 3 or 4 years after bottling, there's no reason for something that facilitates aging. So a screw top is a completely anaerobic seal. It doesn't allow any oxygen to penetrate, and it's a very efficient seal. And I don't know, it's really easy.
That's a good point.
Pick up the bottle, and seconds later, the wine's in your glass.
Nothing wrong with that. I do want to show some folks, there's a ton of closures out there, and here's an example of most of them. So you do have screw cap right here, or twist off down at the bottom, but all sorts of different corks, all sorts of, this is a Zork. I was telling Bettina yesterday, we have quite a few wines here that have glass closures. Can you tell me, Bettina, anything about, is that hygienic, or is it just more look and marketing?
That is also anaerobic, and glass is very antibacterial. So it's a very I don't know, clean, safe. I don't know what the right word is.
Right.
You're not going to get any bad bacteria in your wine with glass. So no, it's a great closure. I love those glass closures. They're a little more expensive than than screw caps because they're a little more unusual. They're not as widely in production.
Right.
So we stuck with screw caps. We stick with screw caps because there is a a sort of a cost savings to that versus glass.
And you see the bottle cap here, which is for
Yeah,
those of you
the
that
crown
are
cap. The
the
crown
crown
cap
cap.
very widely used in the wine business for like cellar experiments. So if you are going to, I don't know, try different yeasts, if you're going to experiment with, I don't know, different levels of sulfur, I don't even know. So very widely in the cellar, if you are doing experiments on your wine, you're probably using a crown cap to seal that bottle. Also with sparkling wine, the first closure is a crown cap before the secondary fermentation. So crown caps are very widely used and very well regarded as a closure.
Trying to get unblurry. It's my glasses. And the crown cap, and I see two people, pet knot. Yep, pet knots are very popular with crown caps. So now behind me are cork trees. And I did not know that 50% of the corks worldwide are harvested from Portugal. Does
I'm surprised
anybody?
it's that low. I would have thought it was more.
That's a good point. I also didn't know, and I'll throw this out to the audience. This is 100% natural product. Nothing happens to the trees. They don't have to cut the trees down, which is fantastic. The bark rejuvenates itself. And I'm curious if anybody knows in what type of time frame. You can answer in chat. There's no question on this. How long before you can, after harvesting, how long before you can harvest again? I'll let you talk about that. The red wines I've seen usually have longer corks. Is there anything to size in corks?
Well, I don't know. Yes and no. So I actually have some show and tell items. So this is our sort of most ageable wine we call the Estate Cabernet, and we use a 2-inch cork for the Estate Cabernet, which is a very fancy cork, quite expensive. Yeah. The Cabernet we make the most of, however, we call Counterpoint. It's a Cabernet Merlot blend, and for that we use a slightly shorter cork. So it's 1 3/4 inches. It's still, a fancy cork, but it's not quite as fancy. It definitely does not cost as much. So with the Estate, we are, kind of expecting that wine. Not expecting. That wine will improve with time, for a good 15, 20 years. So
easy, yes.
So the longer cork is just insurance that the cork will be its ally through that process. Would we be able to get there with a 1 3/4 inch cork versus a 2-inch cork? Probably. Mm-hmm. There is a little bit of marketing here. The longer cork is just, sort of speaks more to quality and, all that.
Right. Ageability and
Right. But yeah, a longer cork is a better investment for a wine that is intended to improve with time over an extended period.
Well, and it's interesting because there is a phenomenon known as TCA, and yes. It is I don't even know what the chemical name of it is. I mean, is it a fungus? Is it a mite?
Trichlora something or other.
Trichloroanacyl.
Sure.
But I don't know what it falls under. Fungus, mold, bacterium, what have you.
I think it's a bacteria.
Thank you, Mark. It's a fungus. So
it's fungus. Okay.
Mark, final answer or phone a friend? What are we going to do here? Because
I'm sure he's right. That was Mark Hoffman. Oh yeah, he's right.
Yep. Okay. So it's a fungus, but because I remember when we owned the wine store, the people just rounded up. They said 1 bottle, 10% of the bottles in the case, one of them will be corked. And, that's a little high, but at its heyday, there was TCA or a corked wine at 8 or 9%.
It was very prevalent. Yeah.
And so it's interesting because, by the way, when when you say a wine is corked, it means something. Just because a wine might be off or flawed in another way, it is not corked. So if you get a flawed bottle of wine at a restaurant or something like that, don't tell them it's corked unless it's actually corked, and you will know. Go ahead. I'm
Well,
pointing at you like you're in the classroom. You over there in the camera.
yeah, okay. Well, so here to me is the most damaging thing about a corked bottle of wine. So most corked bottles of wine are not so corked that you smell it and you go, "Oh my God, there's something terribly wrong with this wine." Most corked bottles of wine are mildly corked, which means all of the wonderful things about that wine are kind of muted. So
Yep.
the aromas are, you know, sort of mildly unpleasant. The flavor is, kind of dead. So you probably will drink the whole bottle and think, I don't really like that wine. So
Right.
that is what's terrible about cork taint is it affects your wine to a point where people probably don't realize there's something wrong with the wine. They just think that wine is not very good.
Yeah. And when it's, first of all, it's not going to harm you in any way, shape, or form. So
No, no.
don't think that it's dangerous or anything. And it's growing up in the Midwest, the first time I was associated with it and just smelling, I'm like, oh, this smells like wet basement. This smells like a dank or wet dog or wet soggy newspaper. And but then when we had Hildegard Heyman on from UC Davis a couple weeks back, and she was talking about how the amount of variance between two people on the same wine on what there, it was, the whole show was on sensory evaluation and how different that might smell like wet newspaper to me and be profoundly, overt, but to someone else it could be barely perceptible, and they may, to your point, think it's just diffused or off, but cork wine has a distinctive uh
Well, but it
aroma.
has to be significantly corked. Like it has to have
Correct.
for you to get to wet basement. So I've opened many bottles where the wine is just not very good, but it's not the wine, it's the cork. So
Right.
there's definitely that to me is the worst side effect of cork taint is that
Yeah.
you don't think there's something wrong with the wine, you just don't like the wine.
Correct. Yep. And then Jeff has asked that they've had a number of older vintages corks break over the years. And is that a sign of a cheaper cork, or is that just aging process and cork breakdown?
Well, and so that could be how the wine is stored. So a lot of like, so for instance, we store our bottled wine in a warehouse and they store it cork down. So
Mm,
in order to keep the cork saturated so it doesn't dry out. So it could be that the wine was stored cork up and thus the cork had lots of time in which to dry out. And when it dries out, it gets crumbly.
yep.
Um, cork is a natural product. It doesn't last forever. So depending on how old the bottle is, it's just, you know, a very good chance that the cork is going to break. I break corks all the time. So I would recommend that you invest in something called a Durand, which is a
Mm.
corkscrew expressly made for opening older bottles. It incorporates both a worm and
Two
um,
prongs.
yeah, and the two prongs, what is that called? I can't remember what it's called.
Well, that one's called an asso, but the Duran
Also,
one,
right. The two
yeah,
prongs of also. So it's a great corkscrew for opening older bottles.
super cool. And it's interesting because um, you talked about breathability, and I'm amazed at the synthetic corks. And Mark actually talked about how the cork taint that was very, very prevalent in the 80s really much was kind of the catalyst of the screw cap or the twist off from that standpoint. And it also spawned a whole industry of synthetic corks.
Yeah.
Now, do these breathe?
No.
Yeah, I didn't think so, although I heard a rumor that they might have been developing some sort of breathable
Oh,
polymer
it's
for these.
possible. It's very
Yeah.
possible. I mean, there's a lot of new closures. Like I have examples of what's called the DM cork here, which is kind of taking the wine industry by storm.
And
So
why is it taking the wine industry by storm?
because they guarantee uniformity. They guarantee uniform oxygen, what's it called? Where it goes through, whatever that word is I'm looking for.
Pressure, the neck.
No, like exchange. They guarantee
Okay.
Uniform oxygen exchange, and they guarantee 100% no TCA. They have a lot of guarantees.
Interesting.
In order
Transmission.
that's the word, oxygen transmission. Thank you.
Mark Hoffman, class valedictorian this evening.
Yes, he is. And he should be, because I think Mark sold Corks. I'm pretty sure you sold Corks for a while, Mark, didn't you? Anyway, I'm sure he'll tell us. So anyway, so Diam is this company that has made huge inroads in Europe.
Super cool. Okay.
And is now spending a lot of money to make inroads here in the US. And I know a lot of winemakers. So for instance, David Ramey is a big advocate for Diam. He's now bottling all his wines with Diam corks. He's sort of proselytizing about how dependable they are, how foolproof they are, how fail-safe they are, and how they're a better product than natural cork. So we're experimenting with it. I'm not ready to get that excited, but whatever. Yeah, we are experimenting with Diam corks. And just like with natural corks, you can get them in different sizes. So this is, I think, a 5-year cork, and I want to say this is a 15-year cork. So depending on how long you are sort of projecting the ideal time in which to open your wine, you would get a shorter cork, which has more oxygen exchange, I believe, or a longer cork, which has less oxygen exchange. And they, they can sort of fine tune it depending on.
Give me an example of like the price difference between the DM standard cork and just your regular everyday cork.
I don't know. I think they're a little bit cheaper, but I mean, it's not like a huge savings.
Right.
But I could even be wrong. I'm not sure. I mean, there's an incredible amount of variety in what you can buy in terms of natural cork.
Oh yeah.
So, and it's not about money. That's not why you make that decision.
Right. Well, we talked a little bit about cork harvesting, and this is a great example of how that's actually done. These guys, there's a whole forest upon forest in Portugal where the bark is harvested off the tree. And as I said, this is done every 9 years on the tree. This gentleman clearly is in some sort of a CIA witness protection program, because the camera has absolutely caught him by surprise and he does not look happy to be photographed. Again, could be a relative, Bettina. I'm not saying your dad has friends in Portugal, but surprise. But I think it's interesting how they take this off, and then when they bring all that in, and they bring it in by the tons, it is just fascinating. And Mission Control, who is off the picket line, is going to show you, put a link in the chat at the end of the program this evening of a video that is about 10 minutes in length, but it walks you through the entire process of harvest into the factory, the computer machinery that is in this industry to, clean this, sterilize it, cut it, sort it, package it. They've got cork flooring, cork boats, cork attire, cork shoes coming out of this factory, in addition to corks. It's an amazing industry, and they use everything. Nothing goes to waste. Even the scraps get regenerated. So it's a pretty interesting industry. I'm a big fan of the natural corks. But you decided to make a white wine for the first time, and I know you have, what's new at Laurel Glen is going to be something coming out near the end of this year in Q4. Tell us a little bit about that.
So we've really enjoyed having a Sauvignon Blanc portfolio, but the classic Bordeaux white is a Sauvignon Semillon blend. So in 2022, we found a Semillon vineyard that we really liked, and we bought a ton, hardly a lot. And we will actually be releasing a Semillon Sauvignon blend in the fourth quarter of this year. I'm going to say October, but don't quote me. And we're calling it Blanc Squared. So this is Blanc Slate. It's a single variety. Blanc Squared is 2 varieties.
So I love the label, by the way, very whimsical and with all the names crossed off and the silly and the emasculating and that sort of stuff. Do you sit around? Does the team sit around and come up with stuff? And
No. So with one of what's the word? One of the reasons we made that's the wrong word. Anyway, the sort of inspiration for this wine, I guess I'll say, is that guy who called me in November and said, let's buy a winery. His wife is a huge fan of Sauvignon Blanc. So for years he'd been sort of like nudging me, wouldn't it be nice to have a white wine? Wouldn't it be nice to have a Sauvignon Blanc? So one day I turned to Randall and I said, what do you think? Should we try Sauvignon Blanc? And he said, well, as a matter of fact, there's this vineyard that I've really admired. I'd love to experiment with their fruit. So we bought, I don't know, half a ton and bottled, I want to say 30 cases, and we loved the wine. So we decided, okay, we're going to make a Sauvignon Blanc. What are we going to call it? So that is always one of the hardest parts when you're developing a new wine, because everything is trademarked, everything.
Correct. Yep.
So I turned to the wife of my business partner and I said, help me come up with a name. So she and her husband went out to dinner one night, drank way too much wine. And the next day I get texted this like sheet of paper with all of these crazy names on it. And I'm sitting at my desk thinking, crazy old white wine? What? So, I go through this list and I'm sort of making my little notes, bad, good, not so bad,
Right.
not so good.
Lawsuit material.
Exactly. And then I met with my label designer who, I've worked with for many years. She's wonderful. We have a great relationship. And like we're throwing around ideas and this was not the first idea, but when it was actually me, when I had this idea, I was like, that's it. And of course I was, sort of communicating with Alicia, the wife of my business partner. So I sort of made a date to sit down with her, and she lives in LA. So I flew down to LA and I meet her at a restaurant. We sit down at a high top and I present this idea. And she's like, she was like very suspicious. Anyway, whatever. So we all love the idea, and it's been a great process. We've really enjoyed the sort of story behind the label.
I like it, and so I'm looking forward to the wine coming out in October as well. And there are a bunch of producers that do a Sauv Blanc Semillon blend, an 80-20. And this one, I think yours is going to have more Semillon.
That's right.
Do you have a percentage?
I want to say it's 60% Semillon, 40% Sauvignon.
Okay, that'll be fantastic.
And the Semillon is barrel aged. So our inspiration for the wine is a Sauvignon Semillon blend that Lassiter makes.
Okay.
Which I love. I think it's such a beautiful wine. So that was kind of the stylistic inspiration for this wine. But Randall decided that, Randall started playing around with the Semillon, playing out with barrel aging. And in the end, he liked the blend with Semillon dominant.
I'm looking forward to that. And it's funny, you mentioned something earlier on corks, especially corks getting dry. And you store, or your storage facility stores the bottles upside down, essentially corks down, so that they never have that problem. And for those of us at home, we don't actually have that luxury a lot of times to have this piece of equipment that stores them. But one thing you want to do with regards to storing wine at home is consistency. So consistency in temperature should be, 45 to 60, somewhere in there, depends upon what you like it. 55 is industry considered the perfect temperature. Similar with the humidity, should be relevant humidity, not that high, not above 70%, but also the lighting. And the lighting, it should be dark or near dark from that standpoint. And when I say consistency, wine doesn't mind if you take it out of it. Like if you have people coming over and you remove 10 bottles from the chiller, and at the end of the night or the next day you realize, oh, we only drank 7 of these, you can put 3 back in the chiller. It's not really going to harm the wine. What it doesn't like, if you do that about 6 times, it'll rapidly age the wine. And I wouldn't go from the fridge to the car, leave it in the car, then back to the fridge. That is also bad.
I
And
tell people, don't store wine in your fridge. It's not a good place to store wine.
no, what wine fridge, but not a refrigerator.
Right.
And lay it flat. Now, the refrigerator, by the way, is I think one of the best. This is a hack, because not all of us have 1,000-bottle cellars except Jeff. But it's referred to, we learned this years ago, 20 years ago, the 20-20 rule. So if you have a small allotment of white wine and you want to keep it in your refrigerator because you have no other storage, that's fine. Pull those bottles out 20 minutes before you serve them, and they will warm up for 37 degrees to about 55 cellar temp. If you've got red wines laying around, put those in the fridge for 20 minutes and they will chill down. And so that 20-20 rule honestly works for about 95% of all wine made in the world.
Well, also, if you drink, I don't know, half the bottle and you're not going to get to it for a day or two, the fridge is a really good place to store an unopened bottle, even if it's red. So, if I open a bottle of Cabernet and I drink 2 glasses, I will cork it and put it in the fridge, and it definitely slows the sort of,
the oxidation and aging process.
Yeah.
All right. So now I'm going to show people where Bettina lives during the day, not actually at night. So this is some people's favorite part of the program.
So pretty.
For Mark and the new folks, because I just realized Mark, but there could be more than one Mark Kaufman in the world. Mark started to give out your name. But Bettina said it first. So Cellar Angels, as I said at the top of the broadcast, we're a direct-to-consumer company specializing in limited production wines from Napa and Sonoma. This is our playground. Are there great wines made in Willamette, Central Coast, Paso? Yes, absolutely. We just know this region better, and our film crew is here. So it's just much easier to do it from that standpoint. But it's also interesting to note the geography and the climate of these 2 counties. Now, Sonoma actually has more soil types than France. So when you think about the tapestry of playground that winemakers get to actually work with in Napa and Sonoma, it's unrivaled in the world. It is, as I refer to often, and people know, this is a Mediterranean climate, very specific climate that only encompasses 3% of the globe. So this is about as unique a place to make wine, and is about as varied from topography, microclimates, AVAs, elevation, wind. It's incredible how neat these 2 counties are. The Sauvignon Blanc vineyard is here. And why did Randall want to, it's somewhere in here. Here's the Ritchie Vineyard. We've sourced some wines from there. What's special about this? I see the Russian River.
What's special about it is that it's an old vine Sauvignon Blanc vineyard, which is very unusual. Sauvignon Blanc is one of those varieties where basically you can hang a lot of production. You can grow a lot of grapes in your vineyard, and it doesn't affect quality that much.
It's a workhorse.
So a typical Sauvignon Blanc vineyard, they harvest, I don't know, 8 to 10 tons of fruit. These vines were planted in the 1970s. So their typical yield is half that. It's about 4 tons. So very concentrated fruit, and we love the effect in the wine. It just gives the wine a little richer mouthfeel. Just gives it a little bit more complexity and depth. Well,
and it's interesting because you're right with the older vines, and the Cellar Angels faithful know this because we've had 75-year-old Zinfandel vines. We had nearly 100-year-old Carignan vines a couple weeks back, and you get tiny clusters, intense berries. And as I'm tasting this wine, I'm telling you, if this was 2000 and planted in 2010, I think it would be so much more acidic. And that to me, and a lot of that, I think you mentioned, comes from the yeast, that softness. It still has great mouthfeel.
Yeah. So Randall uses this yeast. I love the name of it. It's called Elixir. And it's all about preserving the fruit. So it's this yeast which just does a beautiful job of preserving the fruit in the grapes. So,
And you
yeah.
have this in your glass. So when you are assessing it now and tasting it, aromas, flavors, and then pairings.
So I always get citrus, which is very typical for Sauvignon Blanc, but I also always get a little bit of a tropical like kind of undercurrent, like a little bit of pineapple. Some years I get a little bit of coconut.
Mm.
This one not so much, but so there's often a citrus, a tropical note in this wine. Kiwi, pineapple, sometimes mango. In fact, I do get a little mango in this one.
Yep. And the finish, absolutely. That was a great call.
So, the nose to me is a little bit more, I don't know. It has some very typical Sauvignon Blanc aromas, but also some less typical Sauvignon Blanc aromas. And then to me, the wine is all about the mouthfeel. It has this really lovely richness in the mouth, which I think is quite unusual for a California Sauvignon Blanc, and certainly for 100% Sauvignon Blanc. And it just has this wonderful sort of mouth-filling character, which I like to call this the Sauvignon Blanc for Chardonnay lovers. Oftentimes people who like Chardonnay find Sauvignon Blanc too austere, too astringent, too acidic, and this is not that.
No, it's. I was just going to say it's not that. It is not. And I like that you called on and pulled out the tropical notes, because your typical California Sauvignon Blanc is now sometimes getting a little bit difficult to distinguish between that and the New Zealand. It's all grapefruit, it's all straw, and it's all acid. And for those folks that might have an acid sensitivity, this one is so much more balanced and subdued. The acid is there, you can feel it, but it is not going to hit you in the face with it. And those tropical notes, I think, kind of soften that a little bit.
Yeah, so there's plenty of crispness here, but that's not the defining characteristic. And in terms of
pairings, yes.
Yeah, in terms of pairings, I mean, this wine is great with cheese. This wine is great with shellfish. This wine is great with, I don't know, grilled vegetables. It's a very versatile white wine.
Now, a sneaky little vineyard, the McLeod family Indian Springs Ranch, where you're getting the Semillon. And keep in mind, kids, we just got done telling you that there's only 95 acres of Semillon grown in Sonoma County, which is Sonoma's twice the size of Napa County. So how did you find this vineyard, and why is it special?
Well, so the McLeod family are a very well respected family in Sonoma Valley. George McLeod, the sort of patriarch, died recently. And it's a vineyard that we all know and respect. And we had the opportunity, it's not like there's Semillon falling off the truck. It's not like every day you're offered Semillon. So when we started making inquiries if it would be possible to buy some Semillon, and the McLeod family said, well, actually, we could sell you some. We were like thrilled. It's a great opportunity, and it's a great family to be doing business with. So it's sort of a no-brainer.
No, and I like, you're right. It's not falling off the truck, and this looks beautiful. It does look like it has some jagged and rugged hillside, so it's not valley floor type by any stretch. Looks beautiful. Now,
the Sonoma Valley is very narrow, so there's very little, sort of flat valley floor.
Right. Good point. So Glen Ellen, folks, is just about 8 miles as the crow flies from downtown Sonoma. So it's very close, right in here. And then you go up, 12, or you can break out into Glen Ellen. This was, 15 years ago, a sleepy little town, still semi-sleepy, not little any longer, growing, but it is a gauge house, beautiful place. It's got these incredible little, I don't know if you call them inns or cottages, or I guess houses, or a lot of places that are super, super fun to stay. And there's some great dining in downtown.
It's still pretty tiny, Martin. I'm not sure what you're thinking.
There's no stoplights, so that's good.
Yeah, I mean there is not a whole lot. I mean there's a few restaurants, there's one very nice grocery store, there's great bar, and I mean I think that's it, and a few tasting rooms.
That's pretty much it, and a few tasting rooms. And it's kind of nice because you're right on the main turn, you're right on the main thoroughfare. We parked here and just walked over. It's a cozy tasting room. Everyone in there is super, super knowledgeable. You're gonna want to save some time and go through the portfolio. But if you have enough time to knock out 2 tastings this day, our good friend Cindy Costco at Passaggio.
Yeah, I love her wines. She makes wonderful wines.
And it's just
they're
Glen
very
Ellen
well
is going to be they're and the QPR for Passaggio wines are great. But this is going to be, do not, bypass Glen Ellen on your trip out to wine country. You should actually be targeting Glen Ellen. You're not going to have the traffic that you have on Route 29 or 101 and stuff like that. And this is about as quaint as it gets. You've got Jack London Village, you've got Jack London Library, you've got Jack London's house.
So I just want to say that Passaggio is in this little complex of shops and restaurants that includes my favorite restaurant in Glen Ellen, which is the Mill. So it opened during COVID, and it's just really, really good. And it's, like a little stroll over from Passaggio.
And why? Yeah, there's the Jack London Village, which is historic society. Now, why is the Mill your favorite place?
Oh my God, the food is just so fresh and so kind of well prepared, and the owners are the nicest people ever. And it's a very pretty setting, like right on the banks of the creek. It's just I've never had a bad meal there.
And the irony is, you just described literally like 80% of the places I've been to in Glen Ellen. It's, you can hear the water rustling by as you're walking. It's idyllic everywhere you go. And Dahlia, you're going to have a fun time going there in Q1. Christopher, everyone must go to Laurel Glen and Glen Ellen. She and her team are wonderful. That is very nice. I am impressed with this wine, since the Globe last week set 3 records for temperature as the hottest 3 times in the history of record keeping temperatures. This is a great wine for when it gets hot out, which is apparently all over the country. Tomorrow, I promise you, I'm going to stick a bottle of it in the Cellar Angels Club canteen with the QR code, by the way, that we changed. But this is a perfectly hot and cold insulating beverage, and it fits 1 entire bottle of wine, or 2 really, really large martinis. And you also get that as a free gift when you join the Cellar Angels Wine Club. Bettina, I want to thank you. We didn't even talk about red wines, which is almost sacrilege.
Yeah, we make a lot of good wine.
You do make a lot of good wines. Run through the portfolio and volumes that you have.
Sure. The wine we make the most of is Counterpoint. This is a Cabernet Merlot blend from Sonoma Mountain Fruit. The Cabernet comes from our estate vineyard. The Merlot comes from one of our neighbors. And we make about 1,300 cases of this wine. And then our flagship is the Laurel Glen Vineyard Estate Cabernet, 100% Cabernet from our organically certified estate vineyard, about 700 cases. And then in terms of volume, the third would be the Sauvignon Blanc. We make about 400 cases of that. And then these 2 are probably tied at about 200 cases or so. So we make a little bit of rosé from the oldest vines on our vineyard, some of which are not Cabernet. And we make a small amount of what we call the lot series, which is a barrel selection of what I like to say is the barrels with the most personality, biggest.
Wow.
Everything.
Nice.
Yeah.
So if I'm doing the math correctly, you're under about 2,500 cases.
We're about 2,800 cases.
I was never good at math. So 2,800 cases, comfortable, or do you want to grow?
Me personally does not want to grow. Like we like to play. So, we're doing this Semillon Sauvignon blend. We have, a sparkling wine on the lees, which we might be releasing in 2024. we've bought a ton of Riesling the last 2 years just for something, so I don't know.
As if your family knows anything about Riesling.
Well, I was very snotty about the idea of a California Riesling being good enough for us.
I don't blame you, and with good reason.
But we found a Riesling, which, I mean, my father doesn't like it, but everyone else seems to.
Oh, that is absolutely adorable. That is super cool. No, we're looking forward to all of the new offerings coming up. And by the way, I mentioned it previously, you guys. I mean, Save the Family Farms, 6 bottles gets you free purchasing. I would think you could easily load up on 4 of the Laurel Glen SB that we're having tonight, 2 of the Carignan from Nick, one of the best Carignans I've ever tasted, or 5 of Bettina's and 1 of Nick's. Either way, 6 bottles. You guys knocked it out of the park last week when that offer started. So this is what it's all about, is helping the limited production winery grow. Move some product, get it in the hands of wine lovers so that you can appreciate all of the hard work, passion, dedication, and persistence that goes into this business. And it is not for the faint of heart. And Bettina has been knocking out of the park for about 20 plus years. So it's a credit, and we can do all we can to help make certain it continues. Thank you. You are just fantastic. Can't thank you enough for spending Friday night with us. Next week, as I mentioned, we have Dan Parrott from Jack's Vineyard. We're going to be doing Cabernet Franc. It is hot out there, folks. Stay hydrated, be kind to one another, be good to one another. There was a crazy movie that came out during the pandemic called Don't Look Up. I encourage you, look up. The skies are filled with marvels at night, and I get to see them here in South Florida because there's no ambient light. I'm sure Bettina has beautiful night skies out in the Sonoma area. But kindness, if you've got a chance to do that tomorrow, take it. It's a good thing. And we will see you here next week with Dan Parrott from Jack's. Thanks, everyone. Cheers.
Thank you, Martin. Thank
Bye-bye,
you,
Bettina.
everyone.
Good to see
That was
you.
really fun.